Hello and welcome to Politics Today, the last programme of 2017, and this programme today will be looking back at some of the remarkable political events that we've seen this year. And my guest for today's programme is Peter Mcilvenna, political researcher in the House of Lords, and it's a great pleasure to have Lorna Corke, the President of the Christian People's Alliance, on the programme. So welcome to the programme. I'm going to start off with you, Lorna, first.
Yes.
This is your first time on the programme,
yes.
And congratulations on your new appointment as
Thank
the
you.
President of the Christian People's Alliance. So it's a pleasure to have you on the programme. Can you share with us how you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, very briefly, and why politics matters to you?
Well, I thank God for Sunday school teachers, because something really captured my spirit as really a 5-year-old. And then I drifted away because my father didn't believe, and I thought that was cool to follow him, until actually I had my first child and the doctors told me she might die. And that's when doctors tell you these sort of things, you then have to get real and think, who can I turn to? Because I did not want my daughter to die. And that's when God just came powerfully into my life. And I have to say that I have 4 children now. My husband died a while ago, but I found it a great blessing to teach my children from the Bible, that I had a great desire in me when I held my baby girl. I had to teach her truth, and I had to ask the question, what is truth? And that's when my parents had been working in Vancouver. My father had an absolute miraculous healing, and I knew he'd been healed, but it took the threat of my daughter dying for me to get real with God. So sometimes a crisis can, blossom into a meaningful relationship with the Lord.
Fabulous. And how did you get involved in politics, and why is it important?
I knew in the 80s it was a strong feeling we should never have joined Europe. It was like that. But what could you do about it? I was bringing up a wife and children, and I think when it came to the referendum, that's when I thought, and actually started to listen to Nigel Farage, and thinking, yes, this guy, I believe, is speaking the truth about what's going on. And yes, so I actually got involved with politics then. But it was a year ago when Sid Cordell, leader of Christian People's Alliance, asked me if I'd stand in the next general election, thinking it'd be 2020. But as we know, it was jumped on us. And suddenly, yes, I was preparing for a general election as best I could. And going to the hustings, the challenge of the hustings. You never knew what questions were coming your way, but and I realised that actually being a Christian and standing for a Christian party, it was just like a glove fitting a hand. It just, for me, it just seemed the way to go forward. And although it was a challenge to stand up in a general election, what really touched my heart was the people who came up to me quietly after a hustings and said, thank you for standing. And I know there are people out there who are crying out to God for this nation, knowing what can we do with what is the demise of one Christian law after another, after another. What can we do? Just praying and crying out to God. And I meet them, and when I tell them what I'm doing, I get such affirmation, and they're just so glad that somebody is standing up. There are others, of course, but yes.
Thank you, Lorna. I think you speak for the majority of our viewers as well, so very much appreciated of you getting involved in politics and defending Christians and Christian values. Peter, it's always a pleasure to have you back on Politics Today. Now, you did stand for UKIP during the election. Maybe you can share with us a little bit about your experience as standing as a candidate for UKIP in this year's general election.
Well, very similar to Lorna. It was my first time standing, and again, talking about standing in a few years and suddenly everything happens at once, and the chaos of that. But it was great fun, going to hustings, engaging with people, saying that as a Christian, this is what I want to do, bring positive influences to society, benefit those who are left behind, who are downtrodden, and to explain what it means to be a Christian and have the freedom to do that. But it was fantastic, just knocking on people's doors and just talking to people about a whole range of issues and understanding where people are. And I think standing in an election means you talk to people who you wouldn't normally talk to. You may go to areas you wouldn't normally go to. And it's just eye-opening, and God really speaks to you through that. Just being able to converse, talk to people who you would never meet in everyday life. So it was great.
Fantastic. Lorna, we're discussing some of the major political news events of 2017, and one issue that keeps coming up, and this is increasingly difficult situation facing Christians politically, and this is marginalisation of Christians. And if we look, for example, that Tim Farron was leader of the Liberal Democrats during the election, but after the election had to resign because he was a Christian, saying there's no place for Christians in politics. Should we be concerned by this?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing this unless I knew the Lord had spoken to me and said, this is what you do, and this is how I move forward in my life. The Lord has usually, not a lot, but spoken to me at critical moments saying, this is what I want you to do. And I think, okay, that's good enough for me. Just get up and go and do it. And I want to encourage Christians, because I know what it is to feel that, oh, I'm not good enough to do this. But God enables his people, doesn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's have a look now at Lord Pearson from the House of Lords discussing Christian freedoms that are under threat in the UK.
My Lords, can the government confirm that the latest definition from the CPS of a hate crime is one which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by prejudice based on a person's religion? So, my Lords, can the government confirm unequivocally that that a Christian who says that Jesus is the only Son of the one true God cannot be arrested for hate crime or any other offence, however much it may offend a Muslim or anyone of any other religion?
My Lords, I'm not going to comment on that last question from the Noble Lord. However, what I will say is that when the public statements were revised, the definition did not change. It has been the same for the last 10 years. But the Noble Lord will also be interested to know that this was as a result of a public consultation which went on for 13 weeks, and there were 126 responses. Overall, they were positive, and they welcomed these revised public statements.
And we have to thank Lord Pearson for defending and standing up for Christian values here in the UK. Now, you work very closely with Lord Pearson, and he's very brave and very courageous, but how can that possibly be labelled as hate speech? The fact that you believe that you believe in God, but more importantly, you believe that he has only one son, and that is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ.
Well, it's a slow destruction of our Christian laws, which have been there for many, many years. And I was in the chamber there. He wasn't going to intervene on that question, and he decided actually he wanted to make that point. And he asked about an open goal for the government minister to say, of course, speaking about Jesus being the Son of God, no problem. That would never be a hate crime. And yet the government minister said, I'm not going to answer that question. And Lord Pearson actually said he's been in the House of Lords since 1989. And he said it's the first time he can remember where a minister just flatly refused to answer. And I think we are here because Christians are not vocal enough about what they believe. And part of the CPS definition of hate crime, in effect, you could say, is a Muslim blasphemy law. It's used by others to silence someone else speaking a view they don't agree with. And he made the point about Muslims because when you say Jesus is the Son of God, it will get at the basis of the Islamic faith, and it will infuriate many Muslims, and that's why I asked the question this time of Christmas, is it legal to sing Christmas carols? Some people may think, oh, you're taking this too far, but actually it's done in the legislation. The CPS have it. The definition is so wide that it can include anything which offends anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place. So because of that, Christians really are in danger of an overzealous police officer hearing something and saying that could offend someone, I'm going to arrest you. And they would be following the letter of the law if they did that.
Extraordinary. And Lorna, you know, to say that Jesus is an offence and declaring that he is the Son of God, as we truly believe, may actually cause us to have political problems in this country. Doesn't that actually offend us? So what about Christians who get offended by those comments, and recognising that, yes, we may live in a post-Christian society, but predominantly this is still a Christian country. The Church of England is still the established church, and therefore doesn't the government have a duty to protect Christian values more than any other in this country?
I think so. I have lived and worked in a Muslim country, and when I went there, it was with respect for their culture, to actually not offend them. And I think when you go and live in somebody else's country, there needs to be a kind of respect to what has been there. And of course, Christianity has been, since Alfred the Great? You know, it's been here all through those centuries. And it's very easy to sort of pull down something that's good. But really, why there are Christians in politics is, and why you're here, is because you believe that we need to kind of come up and start to be vocal and say, look, what we have today does not work. Our young people, there are 45% increase in homelessness. Our young people are all over the place because they don't know what to believe. They're given no grounding. I mean, I was taught, I can remember at school being taught the 10 Commandments. You know, it was a basis on how to behave, what to do, what not to do, whether you actually believed in it or not. It was a grounding and brought about an ordered society.
Absolutely. And on this issue, I mean, we've faced this year, 2017, unprecedented wave of Islamic terrorist attacks. I mean, for example, in March we had the Westminster attack in which over four people were killed and over 70 injured. That was followed by the Manchester Arena terrorist attack that came in the midst of the general election. And then we also had it was the London Bridge terror attack as well, which was absolutely horrific. And it seems that we are now in the midst of a wave of terrorism, particularly now that the ISIS fighters have come back from Iraq and also Syria, pose a direct threat to our national security, and these terrorists want to destroy our way of life. Do you think the government has woken up to this danger, or do you think it's beyond the government's ability now to confront with this problem that we're dealing with?
Well, yeah, you're right. We did have 4 or 5 months, and it was happening monthly. And Lord Pearson asked a question. He started off his question by saying, we know that most terrorist attacks are carried out by Islamists. There was uproar. I was in the chamber, the wall of anger. Nonsense, lies, how dare you say that? Anger at pointing out what the problem is. So I think our political class, they're completely blind, or they are afraid to face the issue, because if they do face this issue, they're worried that actually there'll be more attacks. So if they just keep quiet and hope it goes away, which it won't. So I can't see a way out from our political leaders unless God opens their eyes and they wake up and see what is really happening, that these attacks are from a root in Islamic teaching, then nothing will change unless they see that.
And the longer they leave it, the less likelihood that the government will get to grips and deal with this issue.
Well, absolutely. And while they're not addressing this issue of Islamic terrorism, we also see the massive demographic changes happening. We see the madrasas, Islamic schools being completely separate from Ofsted, Ofsted having no clue. Again, we've had questions in the Lords asking the government how many madrasas there are and do they know what's taught. And the government says, we don't keep those figures. So they've no idea if hundreds of thousands of kids, 15 hours a week, having an Islamic seminary in effect, and the government have no idea what they're being taught, and they don't really care, they don't want to know. And surely we should be protecting our kids, because if we don't, as Lorna was saying about our kids, if we don't teach our kids truth, then our society is lost. We can make a difference, we can push back the tide if we bring truth into our education system, but if we don't do that, then there is no hope.
And Lorna, this year we had a hotly contested general election. Many political commentators will say it was an unnecessary general election. And if our Prime Minister Theresa May had any hindsight, she would look back and say that she ruled the day that she ever called the general election, which she was hoping to strengthen her majority, and that would give her a strong political legitimacy in the eyes of the British people to negotiate our withdrawal from the European Union. And yet we saw her lose a majority, and we've seen her hold on to power thanks to the DUP in Northern Ireland. But we've also seen that political momentum has switched from Theresa May to Jeremy Corbyn, and no one gave him a hope in this election, and yet he won 40% of the vote. What does that say about what's happening in British politics today?
I have read that there's been a deliberate policy to go into the universities with an agenda to promote remaining in Europe. So, and I don't think there's equal debate on issues. They're not free to talk. I mean, it's like our freedom of speech is being clamped down. And certainly in the universities, when I was a teenager, the university students would be the ones who were out there on the streets protesting, whereas now they're being indoctrinated, I have to use that word, really programmed into what they should be thinking. And even now it's starting, even in our schools, in primary schools, questioning gender. You know, how can you imagine a 5-year-old boy being asked if he wants to be a girl? I mean, they're there to learn to read and write and learn about the world, and we're questioning things like that.
And what did you make of Theresa May's leadership? Because, you know, prior to the election, she was in an incredibly strong political position, and now she looks incredibly vulnerable. As of recording this programme, she's just lost her first vote in the House of Commons on Brexit, and she looks like a very weak leader indeed.
Well, she's just had her, 12 backbenchers have rebelled, so she lost by 5 votes or 6 votes in the end. She was a weak Home Secretary, very good at talking, very good at public speeches, but didn't deliver on much. She probably looked at Gordon Brown, who didn't call an election and regretted that, and she thought, actually, I can't do that, I think I should call an election and go for it, and called it, and as you said, probably regrets ever having done that. Having to go with the DUP to prop her government up, it's a mess, and that comes over in the whole negotiation as well with the EU, that she doesn't come from a position of strength, she comes from a position of weakness, and it means they call the shots. They tell her what they want, and she has to agree to them. So it's not good for the country having weak leadership. It's not good for the Brexit negotiations having a weak leadership. But of course, the Conservatives will not call a general election, because if they did, possibly Labour will get into power. So they're going to cling on to that. So we need to pray for stability in the country, because as she clings on and limps forward, it means the country can't do what it could do with a strong and a stable government, to take her phrase. So we need to pray for some stability to come into it, and for, even with a weak government, that God would still give us as a nation what is best for our nation.
Yeah. Lorna, there has been one particular issue that has dominated UK politics this year, ever since the British people voted to leave the European Union in June 2016, and that's Brexit. What is your perception of what is happening in terms of our negotiations with Europe to bring about our withdrawal from the European Union?
I think it's a fudge. But one issue that really concerns me is the European Court of Justice, which is going to go on for 2 years. And so we're going to be underneath that for the next 2 years, and any other law that they bring in meanwhile. That concerns me. What are they going to do? I mean, they obviously don't want us to leave because they want our money, but that concerns me. So I think, in actual fact, it's not really Brexit, is it?
No.
If we're going to be underneath that.
Which leads me on asking you, as you are our kind of real expert in this one. When it comes to Brexit, it seems, this is my perception, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my perception. It seems like the government is kind of preparing us, or preparing for the next government, to get us to join back into the European Union and have another referendum. They'll say the economy's in a mess, our country's in a mess, and we've got another opportunity to see whether we want to join the European Union or not. Here's our opportunity, and have another referendum in about 10 years' time, but we actually de facto don't really leave the European Union. I mean, that's my biggest concern.
Well, I mean, yeah, as Lorna said, still sitting under the ECJ, that's concerning. That we will continue to be aligned with the customs union, so the trade agreements that we have will have to remain the same. The whole reason we voted to leave was so that we could do our own things, what was best for our nation, for our people, and still we're trapped and held onto this system. The decision by Parliament, which we just talked about, Theresa May has defeated, was that Parliament would have a vote on the final trade deal. That's not how these things work. So you've got 27 nations, they will agree what the trade deal they want with Britain, they give it to Britain. Theresa May can't sign that, she has to go to Parliament and ask. So if Parliament say they agree with that, then everything's good. If Parliament say they don't agree with that, well, they can't do anything with it. There isn't a second one. You either agree to that or you don't agree to anything. The EU are not going to, the EU have said, this is the deal we want, take it or leave it. The British Parliament, if they reject it, then we go out with no deal, which it actually would be fine. I mean, we go under WTO rules, it would be absolutely fine as a country. But the best, this is actually, if I was advising David Davis, I would recommend that you have Lord Pearson, maybe Nigel Farage, they can sit there, and it would be a very quick negotiation. They would say, we want full free trade. We'll have no tariffs, no barriers, so full free trade with each other. That's what we want. We'll pay you until the end of the term, so whether it's another 2 years, we'll pay our obligations. You've got until the end of the week to decide it. And they'll take it back, and their German car manufacturers, French wine makers, they will want full access to us because we are their biggest market. So they would sign it by the end of the week. And we wouldn't have to have this 2-year long negotiation. 5 days, it would be done, simple.
Lorna, we're coming down to the end of the programme, less than 4 minutes left, and we've got to look at some of the challenges facing Britain in 2018. For a Christian who's involved in frontline of politics, how can you advise our wonderful viewers who care about Christian freedoms in the UK and also care about us leaving the European Union to pray for our government at this time?
Yes, I think a national day of prayer would be the call, would be the prayer request, crying out to God, and to have a counter-coup, the Lord's counter-coup about what's going on, because as I mentioned, the whole structure has been built from Edward Heath in 1972 on faulty foundations. He didn't have a mandate from the people to do what he did, so the whole thing needs to come down. But I believe we've got to a situation where it is only the Lord that can really come in with his mighty hand and deliver us.
Absolutely. And Peter, what do you say are the major political challenges you can see coming up ahead in the year 2018?
I think it is an unstable government, and I think that we really, really do need to pray for our leaders to have expert advice around them to really understand what needs to be done. The issue with Tim Farron was really, really sad that a leader said it was difficult for them to be a Christian and involved in politics. So we need to pray for Theresa May, to pray that if she does have a Christian faith, if that's just historical, whatever it is, that she will draw on that, and that she will become closer to God, and that she will have that godly wisdom in all her negotiations. But for the whole negotiation team, why not as Christians, the viewers, to pray for every single person involved in those negotiations to find Christ. And they will be negotiating not just on a purely economic basis, but they'll be negotiating from an understanding of what God wants for a nation.
Absolutely. And Lorna, I have to say that why is politics so important, particularly for our viewers, to get involved in politics in 2018?
Yes, I am asked that. And Jesus said, go out into all the world. Why not Parliament? Okay.
Well, they need it there anyway. No, absolutely.
So I see it as making a stand. And as I said earlier, I do believe I wouldn't be doing this unless I knew the Lord really wanted me to do it, because I know it's a tough call, but he's been good to me.
Absolutely. And Peter, in summing up, how important is it that our viewers really make a stand and get involved in politics? Because many view this profession as being an ugly profession, but it's so important, isn't it, if we are to defend our freedom, to defend our right to spread the gospel?
Well, it's not even in politics. Whatever area of society God gives you an interest in, you get involved and you shine for him, and you carry his presence wherever you go. With politics, it's you pray. Everyone reads the newspaper or looks online at the news or watches the news in the evening. I mean, how many times have you thought of maybe going into work, reading the metro, on the train, or watching news, and thought, actually, I should pray about this? Because so often we see it as just information for ourselves. Why not just stop and say, God, what do you want to teach me through this? How can I pray into this? And mention to your church leader, say, well, this issue has come up this week. I really feel as a church, could we really pray into this? And help the church understand what's happening and to pray into it. So just whatever your understanding is, you bring that into your area of influence, your church, your friends, and you pray about these issues and lift them up to God.
Yeah. Peter and Lorna, thank you so much for being my guests on Politics Today.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you for watching today's Politics Today, and I want to wish you, our wonderful viewers, a very happy Christmas and a wonderful New Year. And can I encourage you to pray for those in power, pray for those in Parliament, but also to stand up for Christian values and freedoms in 2018.
Yes. Hallelujah.